Hey everyone, Dr. Frunkey here with a really fun video for you. I wanted to test a question that I get very often and a discussion that comes up over and over in the knife community. And that question is it as smooth as a Norseman? And that question comes up because the Grimsmo Norseman is a very unique knife made by the brothers Grimsmo up in Canada. This knife is a testament to CNC machining tolerances, and it has the most amazingly smooth drop shut action, perhaps in the industry, and certainly one of the smoothest actions I've ever experienced. You can see how it just drops shut, bounces off of the stop pin, and then back into the detent position. So very, very smooth. Now, I have amassed a collection of knives here to sort of compare to that action to see if there are other knives that achieve this level of smoothness, or maybe if there's something even better than what the Norseman actually has. So I'm going to go ahead and start out with a knife that I think is the most similar in a lot of ways, and that is the Brown Knives Servo. I made a direct comparison video of these two on my channel, but I just wanted to demonstrate that CNC tolerances have gotten much better, and these small-time makers are making some knives to extremely precise levels, and it's allowing them, like this knife, to become very smooth. Now, this knife, the blade is not proportioned exactly like the Norseman, and so it doesn't fall in the same way, but as you can see, it just tried to cut my finger off. The action is unbelievably free when it drops shut, and in fact, I don't know that there's any more resistance, but it just has a more smooth overall action. It doesn't bounce out. That's something that I've discovered that I actually think I prefer. That if something is so smooth that it unreliably closes because it bounces off of its stop pin and out of its detent, just like that, then I'm not so sure that that's a good thing. Moving on, let's take a look at the Koenig Aria. The Aria is also an incredibly smooth knife. It has just a hint more resistance, but it's very, very smooth. It's one of the smoothest knives out there. You know, this is just one fraction of a bit slower at dropping close, but under its own weight, it falls close very nicely. Again, in a slightly more controlled fashion, and the detent is stronger, so it locks into place. Another similar knife is going to be the Gareth Bull Chamois. I would say this knife is very, very close to what the Norseman feels like in the sense that there's no resistance felt. That's much more significant on the smaller version here. This one feels like it's running on electromagnets. I would say that this knife, the Gareth Bull Chamois, comes the very closest to emulating the sort of resistance-free feeling of the Norseman. But again, this has a slightly more controlled fall shut action, and I do like that very much. A lot of people ask if the Jason Guthrie Scout is as smooth as a Norseman. I will say that it is most certainly not. No washer-based knife is going to be as smooth as the smoothest ball bearing knife. Although this does have a wonderfully smooth and hydraulic action, no, this knife does not come anywhere close to feeling like what the Norseman or any of these other knives really feel like. Now, it's a very smooth and excellent action, but it's just different entirely. Well, I have a couple of Shirogorovs out here. I'll bring out my new F3R. This is a multi-row bearing F3. This one is not close to what the Norseman feels like. It has a smooth action, but significantly more resistance at many different places. A lot of that, I think, has to do with the detent. The flattened detent ball on the Norseman gives it that very smooth drop shut action. The Shirogorov Sigma has a very smooth action as well. Even though it drops shut quite freely, it has a smoothness to it that's very different than the Norseman. Again, I'll just demonstrate what happens. Every time you close this knife, it just falls so rapidly that it bounces right off. Now, I think you can adjust it so that you can adjust your capture so that you do get it and it stays in place, but it is a thing that it bounces off. The last knife I have up here is a Krueger K4. This is on loan from my buddy Tony Meter. This is sort of representative of some of the other South African knives. I have a couple of South African makers already on the table here, but they're really known for their very, very smooth actions. And while this knife is incredibly smooth, it's still not quite the same as what the Norseman feels like. So really and truly, I think that this knife has what we're going to call the smoothest action, because this is tightened down so that the blade doesn't wiggle when the lock bar is disengaged, very tight tolerances, but the action remains unbelievably smooth because it falls down. Now, I think this is a combination of factors. The weight of the blade out at the tip allows the thing to swing like a pendulum and bring the knife down closed. The very smooth ball bearing action combined with very tight tolerances, as well as the flattened detent ball that's on the inside here. Most of the resistance to opening and closing a knife, and once you overcome the detent, is going to be on that detent ball, so that flattened detent ball does work quite well. Actually, I have another knife off screen here that I'm going to bring on, and that is the North Arm knife Skaha. This is another knife that has a flattened detent ball, and that action is incredibly, incredibly smooth. Now, this knife is not as smooth as the Norseman, again, because it doesn't have as quite a heavy blade. But that flattened detent ball goes a long way to making that action much smoother. So I'm not sure if this is a proprietary thing. Obviously it's not, because the North Arms guys are doing that, as well as the Grimsmos. And you know, on a couple of knives, Craig Brown did it, although it's not that common on all of his knives. That flattened detent ball may be the next step in the evolution of the knife action right there. So maybe we'll start seeing that on some more knives. But I think it's interesting to just talk about that the Norseman is unbelievably smooth, but maybe there's a level where it's too smooth, where it's almost unsafe, because that bounces out of the detent and then it's open. So if you're moving quickly, you may not secure your blade, and that could become a problem. So tell me what you guys think down below. Do you have any other knives that you think should be compared to the action of the Norseman? Let's talk about it in the comments down below. Go ahead and click like and subscribe to my channel here. Follow me on Instagram as Dr. Frunkey. And as always, guys, take care.